Okay, what is going on, engineering hooligans? I am your engineer of the day, as always, Do Belong. Today, we're going to be looking at a very special guest, actually. We are going to be looking at the hero of the very hard leader campaign in Borderwise's latest playthrough, Gary the Monitor. This thing saved Borderwise's bacon during that last episode. I believe it was episode 5 that just came out. So I figured that I would derail all of my other review plans and take a look at this thing in a dedicated episode. Gary the Monitor is meant to be a siege platform to destroy the enemy headquarters by itself, and presumably pulverize any resistance in the form of slow-moving targets. Gary is not dedicated against enemy aircraft and thrustercraft, but is not defenseless either, as it has a very nasty laser that was shown off in the recent playthrough. Oh yeah, also, if you notice something here, I gave Gary an honorary pancake because Gary needs a break after the recent campaign. I figured that Gary might enjoy that. I don't know. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the specifics. We're going to talk about these later, so don't you worry. Gary, I guess it used to be called Gary the Monitor, but it is now called the Gary Bearclaw Flying Artillery, is, I would consider, a super heavy thruster craft, coming in at 947,777 materials. It has a total firepower of 473.72, which is 3/4 CRAM and 1/4 laser. Well, just under. It has a volume of 80,609 meters cubed, making it one of the largest craft in the game. And it has a armor cost of 41.7%, which is very considerable. Gary is a very well-armored fella. But we shall talk about that in a second. Gary's top speed is 85 meters per second, and apparently there was never a cruise speed measured. Although I don't use the cruise speed feature, I feel like most people are probably in the same boat. We just use the top speed, because most craft, I don't think, have a button to go extra fast at the cost of extra materials. They just go. Have I talked about everything that needs to be talked about in the fundamentals? I believe I have. So without further ado, I think it's time we move on to the subsystem analysis. Moving on at the very front, we have absolutely nothing here because Gary, as far as I can see, is a front-sider. Yep, Gary's a front-sider. It is meant to point its nose at the enemy and then blow them to smithereens, although its broadside armor is nothing to be sneezed at either. It has a set of turning thrusters over here. Understandable, everybody needs a set of those. Enclosed within an empty space. Again, nothing here. There's some vents that do nothing. If you ask me, though, you could nab some extra lifting force by just stuffing a couple of helium pumps in there. Just curious, actually, what would that do for us in terms of lifting force? $780 meters cubed of lifting force. Okay, I'm not quite sure. Well, that's some buoyancy force, but that doesn't necessarily tell us how much that's able to lift. Although you can see the vector, I presume there's proportional. Gary is a heavy fella, so you certainly can't lift it via buoyancy alone. Nonetheless, I would presume that some helium with this 5-cent helium pump would give us at least a little bit of fuel savings in the long run. Again, though, can't entirely say. Moving on. Sorry, that's going to get annoying. I'm going to remove that little marker because it was going a bit crazy. We have a giant set of metal wedges. Not heavy armor wedges, metal wedges. And right behind that, we have the first of our many primary armaments. I believe these are all identical. A 2,000mm CRAM cannon set up for AP frag. It has a reload time of 21 seconds. 21.87 seconds. It is set to not synchronize with anything, but it does fire a pretty big shell. It has a connecting image of 207,287 with 20 AP. That, I believe, gives us a KDAP of 4 million, which is enough to destroy 10 heavy armor beams. Of course, I do believe these are affected by angles, But nonetheless, in terms of raw firepower, I don't think any railgun slug can beat a CRAM cannon of this magnitude unless it is running Sabo and extra rail draw. It also has a very nasty, very powerful number of fragmentation bits that it can throw out at the enemy once it gets there. Let's see, on here we see a rangefinder, but it's not actually a rangefinder, it's a laser rangefinder and a camera. The actual coincidence rangefinder is over here. And is it EMP insulated? Let's give it a try. Did anything fall off? It is unfortunately not EMP insulated. We're gonna have to watch out for that then. It does seem like the camera system over here is EMP insulated though. Yes, indeed. The detection on the sides is protected against EMP surges. Always nice to have. Up further rear, we have another turret, and up above that, we have another turret. Pretty simple. I believe, again, these are all identical copies. So they pretty much do the same thing. They chuck a shell into huge amounts of armor, go through the armor, and then throw out very damaging fragments that probably go out the other side of the fortress themselves. But Gary also has a secondary weapon, 80 firepower worth of lasers. If you want to compare, okay, I guess this is a mixed 0 and 1Q setup for some reason. We have some high AP 0Q and medium AP 1Q with a total power draw of about 20,000. Is this the entirety of our laser firepower? Yes, it is. We've got all the laser firepower right here. Its job is, if I recall, to also function as a LAMS. Well, I'm actually not seeing any LAMS nodes, so it might just be a single-purpose laser of destruction to destroy enemy aircraft. If you have, again, if you've seen Gary in the campaign, 82 firepower of laser is not to be trifled with. You can swat down some pretty medium-sized foes, even if it doesn't have any destabilizers, to make the energy drain faster or pierce through internals. Next up behind that, then, we have some lift jets. Gary has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... Is it 9 lift jets? I believe it is 9 lift jets. All of them are configured relatively similarly, with a thrust per material of 13,000 over here, 14,000 over here, 13,000 over here. So moderately efficient. If you don't have too many compressors, you might go down to 10,000. That will make your thrust go up, but that also means that you are burning more material as you do so. For any supplementary uses, Gary also has, I believe this is just the preset Aphorus serial engine. We're going to have to take a look at the power per material of that in a second, because we can't measure it while it is idle. We also have some forward thrusters. Do we have any reverse thrusters? I'm not seeing any reverse thrusters. I guess, to be fair, I think Gary is way too cool to retreat anyways, so it's not like it actually needs them. We also got a massive AI here, and a massive number of shield emitters. Let's see. If there's an enemy, we set the shield drive to 3, which is interesting. I figure that you might set it to 10, but lower shield drives are more efficient. And Gary... I guess we're going to have to take a look at Gary's engine draw in combat, separately from this, in a combat testing section. And over here we've got the ducted jet engines. Although I have to ask... do we have enough clearance for these? Yeah, we do. They are going through air, which means they have all of the trappings of jet engines that can breathe air. I love breathing air. Do you love breathing air? It's also, of course, got enough ammo, plenty, and plenty enough fuel in order to fuel all of this. And back here, we have some medium missile interceptors. I believe they're just the regular setup. Oh, hang on. My, Q button's broken. What was up with that? Medium missile interceptors. In a nice checkerboard pattern, too. Pretty classic. They go out, they destroy missiles. But we also have distraction sticks. We have a massive radar target simulator of 70,000. This This means that it will count as a vehicle that has a detection range of 70 kilometers away, which, oh boy, does the thing need it, because it being so huge, it needs all the help it can get to dissuade any radar-guided missiles. At its max, Gary has a detection range of 34,000 meters. So, this should serve to dissuade a decent amount of missiles from hitting your ship. It is a large decoy after all. For propulsion, alongside the jets, Gary also has a set of propellers, and I believe these have been decoed, which is very nice. They produce 179,000 thrust, which, if you want to have some context, that is the thrust of all of these 4 jets put together in one propeller. We also have a modest, I guess, 1, 2, 3, 4... Let's see, we have 2 turning thrusters on the tail in either direction, and we have 3 on the front. 5 jet engines to turn the entirety of Gary. I do not envy their task, because this guy is very large. But again, it seems like Gary doesn't have too many problems with turning, unless the enemy is in space. Then Gary has a lot of trouble in general, as the result of being a CRAM rushdown craft. Oh, speaking of which, though, we do have a couple of supplementary engines. We have a small injector brick. It has 110 power per volume and 344 power per material. This is very compact, but very inefficient in terms of engines in general. If I was concerned about a substantial power draw, I would have recommended a steam engine of some sort, and we do have one. But judging by the supplementary injector bricks, these are probably here for support for the steam engine over here. Alright. Also, cannot forget to mention, we have a huge number of jet engines over here. You know, at this scale, I do wonder if we should use custom jets instead, but they do allow us to strafe left and right during combat, which we should probably take a look at. A lot of this, after all, we're talking about what it's theoretically supposed to do, but we have not talked about it in practice. Nonetheless, Gary's statement of purpose was relatively basic. It was meant to destroy stationary targets with CRAM cannons and not much else. But I think for its cost, and this is the key part here, a 1 million material unit, I think, can be easily retrofitted, relatively, to be a real campaign destroyer, I think. After all, there's not very much even... there's not very many vehicles, even if they are thoroughly optimized, that can destroy something worth 1 million materials, unless they are equally as large. Alright, I think it's time to discuss the AI. First of all, we have the primary navigation AI by Admiral the Wild High. Its entire purpose is to point 1,200 meters away and cram stuff. 1,200 meters is interesting, because, I mean, I guess it does help to avoid collisions, but by my judgment, Gary should honestly just try and face barrel stuff, anything that it can get its CRAM cannons locked onto, and move in as close as possible. It doesn't matter if the enemy can now hit Gary 100% of the time, because CRAM cannons are inaccurate, and if Gary can hit the enemy 100% of the time, Gary is going to win. So, again, my judgment, Gary should have a algorithm like the Ailstorm Gremlins, where it is able to close in as close as possible, maybe even just ram the enemy, honestly. Gary is, interestingly enough, one of the border-wise craft that does not have rubber on the front, and in my view, could probably use it. Heck, if you installed a pair of giant arms on the front, tipped with drills, you could probably turn Gary into a decent melee craft, because it is... how much mass? 1.6 million mass, which we'll compare that to these things in a second. Overall, though, Gary is a relatively simple craft with a relatively simple purpose, and it has done that purpose relatively well. I don't think we can discuss any metrics for improvement until we see Gary in practice, however. Nonetheless, Gary has once again been a vital part of Borderwise's very hard campaign, and we cannot fault it for any of its performance in the campaign thus far. Alright, that was Gary. But Oh, but silly me, I did forget one last thing. We need to look at Gary's armor distribution. Because after all, Gary is clad in 400,000 materials of armor, which is I believe the cost of an entire Blind Guardian in armor. And we should take a look at that. So, I suppose there's nowhere better to start than with a simple cutaway. Let's cut Gary in half. Don't worry, this only hurts a lot. Gary has a relatively considerable amount of frontal armor, although probably not legendarily armored for a front-sider. We have several sets of alloy beams backed by alloy wedges in order to attempt to mitigate kinetic penetration from stuff like rail guns. We also have another set of alloy beams, this time behind a heavy armor wedge, more alloy, more wedges, so on and so forth. So, just a quick refresher, every single block from the depths has a health points and an armor class. We can multiply those together for an HPAC. If we use the HPAC of all of these blocks put together, and simplifying the alloy wedges as an alloy beam, because my calculator cannot put in too many parameters at once, we have an approximate HPAC for Gary frontally of about 1.16 million. For reference, it's actually about the same as the broadside armor of the tier. But again, the alloy wedges will give us a significant advantage against anything that comes in at even a moderate angle, because shells need to multiply a cosine value of the angle that they come in at from perpendicular. So 90 degree, essentially if they impact 90 degree off from a direct hit, then they will deal almost no damage, and if they impact square on, which is a 0 degree from perpendicular angle, then they will deal all their damage. Gary leverages this in order to maximize I presume, the cost effectiveness of its armor. But it is worthy to note that we do not actually have a ton of armor on the front here. Let's turn the cutting off and go to a back front cutter, going from the stem all the way to the stern. All the way from the front to the back. So, starting off with Gary's face, we see that there is a lot of armor on the broadside here. Indeed. We have about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 alloy beams and a metal beam slope. If we put that into our calculator, that should give us an approximate HPAC of about 350,000. Moving further back, this trend persists relatively consistently. Here's our front armor again. And I do wonder if we get any extra armor over near the cannons, but it seems like we are relying on, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 alloy, no, 6 alloy beams and a metal beam slope, still. Nonetheless, Gary did seem to be able to take on pretty much all the punishment that it was subject to during the campaign, because it is a chonky fella. Moving further back then, yep, it seems like the armor scheme is pretty much entirely consistent throughout the entire ship. Although, worthy to note is, I do believe Gary has a substantial amount of barbette armor once again. You know, one thing that, I guess one major design divergence between my craft and Borderwise's craft is that Borderwise's craft often have frontal barbette armor. Essentially, it is a contingency plan for if your craft is being hit from the front. Presumably, if a shot goes right here, it goes through this turret, and then it will impact over here on the barbette of this turret. This little armored collar means that this area is not a weak point. On broadsiders, it might be slightly questionable, because the chances of something hitting there are slightly lower. But in the case of a front sider, this actually does make a lot of sense. As does the extra side armor here, to protect the valuable turrets. Because turrets are one of the most important subsystems on any single craft. Moving further back then, more of the same. Although I will say, we have a lot of extra voids. Borderwise did mention already that these were left in because Gary was originally supposed to have 6 CRAM cannon turrets, but that was way too expensive, and the CRAMs cannot arc up through the craft in order to have good lines of fire. Maybe if it was a broadsider, it would be able to do so, but it would also probably make it cost over 1 million materials. So we have the voids here. I would say a small critique on my part is that I question the value of some of these armoring segments around the voids. Essentially, I would expect most fire from the enemy to be mostly horizontal, so probably from this angle, maybe slightly up, maybe slightly down. In this case, though, we have a huge amount of armor that's not really protecting very much, because shots might go through here, but if they go through this armor, then there's not really anything there. A shot would probably need to be angled up like this, probably from a submarine, or something like that, in order for this armor to come to fruition and to be useful to us. I know that the Steel Striders do have a couple of gun submarines, but I think the usage is rare enough that it might serve Gary better if this armor was redistributed to reinforce the broadsides. For example, you could replace the metal beam slopes with heavy armor wedges, and replace this area with a bit more empty space. Nonetheless, spaced armor is very nice, so honestly you could probably just replace some of these unarmored sections, metal beams, with air, and basically change nothing else. Again, same deal here, we're basically armoring internal voids. Here, I guess, is a little bit more complicated, because we have jet engines here, but we also have this AI compartment. This definitely does need some moderate level of armor, because this is... well, this is our laser AI. But, as I see here, there's not actually very much heavy armor here. This might be a small weak spot, because if this AI goes down, unless there is a control block algorithm that shunts the control over to the main AI, then the laser will also go down with it. Possibly a small hazard. Nonetheless, oh, we can't even actually cut away all the way to the back of Gary, because Gary is too long. But we do have some ammo compartments here, set in heavy armor to mitigate the effect of detonation. Oh, and I forgot my favorite part of every single episode. I need to detonate this ammo compartment to see what happens. Let's see. Using the... Nope, nope. That is a very safe ammo compartment. Oh, that did chain react, though, actually. You know, that actually does confuse me a bit, because... why does ammo chain react sometimes and not chain react other times? Oh, wait. No, yeah, these are heavy armor slopes in here that should mostly prevent chain detonations. Oh, but I guess if the adjoining slopes that are dividing the ammo boxes are damaged, then I presume that allows the reaction to spread. Nonetheless, it doesn't happen all the time. You do have to watch these jet engines, though, because they are right there, and the fire starts immediately, because the fuel starts burning. So, possibly major item for safety improvements over here. Summing this up, I guess if it were me, I would remove the side armor based on any section on this cutaway. By the way, I do love the structural only view. If we look at the cutaway over here, I would remove the side armor, or at least most of the side armor, on any section that is not actually covering any major subsystems. This mostly refers to this giant internal void over here, and this giant internal void up here, as well as the turning sections up here. I believe this would free up a couple tens of thousands of materials, which we could then use to reinforce the rest of Gary. Also, Gary is a very nice fortress buster, but if you want Gary to have more general purpose use in the campaign, you might want to look at some railguns, or perhaps, actually, reformatting Gary's engines to be a rushdown craft. I think if you gave Gary, say, a speed of 120 meters per second, it could run down most super godly frontsiders. And if you can hit them with the CRAMs, which have a very good material per firepower of 500, then you could do some serious damage. Okay, one last little bit of fun for Gary today. We are going to send it against the tier. I wanted to do this in order to test a couple of things. I wanted to take a look at the shield strength, the engine distribution, and how the CRAMs do against a super large target. Plus, the tier is a little bit more expensive than Gary, but the CRAMs should be able to do some terrible damage. Like, terrible for the enemy, not for Gary. For Gary, it is very good damage. Let's begin. Gary starting off with a laser, immediately triggering smoke, as expected. Railguns coming in, but Gary is able to dodge, because Gary's a thrustercraft. Let's see, Gary is now strafing. Oh, what just came off there? I saw a massive chunk of blocks go off. That's part of a turret. And one of its feet has unfortunately been severed. That's a heat decoy we won't be able to use, or a radar decoy. Let's see. I would like to track the entry wounds first. It goes through here. I don't see any block loss. There's another one that went through here. But that didn't seem to do much. There's one that went through here. Did that cause the damage? Yeah, we're missing some of the turret. But I don't think that gun has been taken out. So, we should be good there. Does Gary have frontal shields? Gary needs frontal shields. I think. I think it would be very handy. I also see that there's, like, double overlapping shields here. But to note, a given shell can only be affected by one shield. The roll to deflection chance is only rolled once for any given shell. So layering them doesn't do very much. Yeah, let's see. I think you might want to just up it to strength 10 here, because multiplying the amount of power drain for the shields, which is negligible, is not nearly the loss compared to the gain that we could get from strength 10 shields, with more deflection chance. But that's just my opinion. Let's keep going. Oh, also, another shot right there. Some shots just whizzed right past us. I don't think they did very much damage, though. One other thing to note is it appears that Gary has some slight struggling with yaw. Let's take a look at the PID here. We are 11 degrees off in some kind of arbitrary error points, I guess. It's not really saying which orientation we're supposed to be in. We are also slightly pitched, and we've got some roll. I don't think the error points are in degrees, which makes this hard to tell, but I do want to note that we aren't really pointing at the enemy, which gives the tier a chance to hit us in the side armor. This is an issue faced by any front-sider that doesn't either have lots of control or lots of side armor. Because from this perspective, you probably still want the shots to come in from this direction instead of hitting you from any point on the side. Also, power. Let's see. Let's take a look at the power consumers. We've got... Let's see. We have some... The lasers are powered, the ECMs are powered, the repellers are powered. Okay, seems like everything is powered. Nice. And the steam engine is producing a nice 27,518 power like it should be. Awesome. Let's keep going. Yep, the shells are doing quite a bit of damage, and the armor is holding up sometimes, but not all the time, which could pose a problem for the Gary. I think, yep, it ate that volley just fine. So sometimes it is able to take out all the damage. Incoming shells. Let's track this one in. Slowing down time a little bit. Goes in and explodes about 5 meters inwards. Did we... Okay, the frags did not go all the way through the tier, but still, that was quite a lot of damage. 90,000 kinetic. I will note at this point that the laser has done more steady damage, but that should change as we get more shells inbound. Oh, speaking of which, there's another one now. That exploded early. Why did it do that? If you ask me, I think it sounds like the timed fuses need to have a little bit more delay put on them. Gary takes some more hits to the face. Oh, that was a hit directly at the turret. I guess one small disadvantage of frontsiders is that you're mostly turret. At least when you look at some frontsiders from the front. Alright, nice hit to the superstructure. Are we gonna get a turret hit? Perhaps? Let's take a look at here, because that was a lot of frags. Yep, some turret damage. But all the... Oh. Some of the guns have stopped. Oh, hang on. Yeah, Gary's facing slightly side-on, which could be a problem sometimes. I think it needs a bit more yaw control. Also, as a comment section post pointed out in one of the other videos, in one of the latest videos, Gary's strafe engines are slightly offset from the center of mass. So, yaw control would be greatly appreciated, I think. Gary's at 97%. Sorry, Gary is 93, Tier is 97. But, if it can land some fatal hits on the turrets, it won't matter. The shell coming in. Oh, the Sea is down. Or is it? Is it just in degraded mode? I can't see the shells coming in. Nope, the Sea was... Okay, can't tell. Direct hit. Oh, devastating hit to the back. That must have destroyed a Sea Whiz. Aim point is honestly luck of the draw sometimes, I feel. If Gary had aimed for the turrets, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now. But that's the luck of the draw when it comes to single-shot devastating damage, I guess. How's Gary's damage report looking? One advantage of the distributed jet system is that one single damage jet block does not a crippled engine make. Also, we are pretty good on the health of the turrets, all things concerned. Gary is taking damage pretty well. Some more frontal armor would be helpful, but it's not necessarily the end of the world that we don't have it. Although yeah, we are showing the side profile to the tier a lot, which I suppose the side armor actually helps in that regard. Also, Gary is lasering itself a little bit every single time that we oscillate back and forth like this. I think we probably do need some yaw control. How is the yaw looking? Is this degrees? You know, this could be degrees, actually. Yeah, we're oscillating about 10 degrees to the left and 10 degrees to the right, which is making the armor slightly complicated, although it might also be distributing the damage a little bit. Gary's at 273 firepower. The tier is at 392. It feels weird to say, but it looks like maybe we need a bit more armor piercing on the CRAMs. Although, maybe the CRAMs are detonating a bit early. We should take a look at the times fuses, if there's any, in the fusing box. Perhaps 0.01 seconds is not enough. Yeah, there's a time to explode. Yeah, perhaps we just need to offset it by a little bit more. Because if a shell is 300 meters per second, then 0.01 seconds is only 3 meters. And most armor that you're going to be attacking is way thicker than 3 meters. So, heck, maybe just offset it for like maybe offset it for 15 meters? 0.05 seconds? That could be better. And you still have some pretty good margin for whatever you're hitting. So yeah, I'm going to make that a recommendation. Change all the fuses to 0.05 seconds time instead of 0.01. That should allow us to leverage our full KDAP. Oh, that was a devastating hit. Right in the middle of the turret. That's exactly what we want to see. The tier's firepower has gone down by 60 since we last checked. And Gary is still flying, because it seems like the jets are very well protected. Oh, we have taken some damage, though, actually. The front one's, the lower front one is down. Where do the shots come in from? Directly from the front. I guess we do need more armor. Oh, also, is this a giant internal void? So there's this giant air gap here, but right over here in this bulkhead, there's no extra armor, which could be a weak spot. We might need some extra armor on this, like, little sandwich section, basically. Still, though, Gary is taking hits like a champ. Well, it seems like our CRAM cannons might be offline. Yeah, we only have one CRAM cannon left. How are we doing on power? Everything is still being satisfied. Although, again, I think, you know, Gary might actually be able to use ring shield, honestly. It is a front-sider. And it has the space to accommodate them. It's just got to make sure the ring shields don't explode from the side. Okay, and I think we're losing yaw control now. Are we 30 degrees off from where we should be? Oh, exactly on the money. We lost the bow controls, and I guess the propellers, the jets to the rear are not able to compensate for the fact that when we strafe to the left, the uneven jet distribution immediately throws us to the right. We would need more jets on the back, no more towards the stern, to account for such asymmetries. So let's see, what recommendations have we got here? Maybe shunt the laser into a LAMS, because it is a very big laser. Add some better yaw control. And increase the CRAM's fuse to 0.05 seconds. Also, we could ironically enough use more armor. Although the extra armor, if you ask me, we should divert some from the sides or over to the front. But that will only work if we can make sure that the Gary is only on target, is able to stay on target all the time. Still though, the jets are very well protected, which means that Gary is able to take hits and not go down. The cannons might need to use a bit more protection though. Still though, overall, very fruitful exercise. I think some buffs to Gary's defensive capabilities would serve us very well here. And heck, maybe we could have some thump missiles or AP crams to distract the Sea-Wiz. Alright, I think we've learned quite enough. Back to the platform it is. Let's give Gary another pancake of honor for its performance. That, though, without further ado, has been Gary. So, let's move on to the other craft we have at our disposal. One of these is one of my personal craft from way back. I wonder if it's even made when they were authoring details, actually. Yes, there were. It is the RGH5 Ballistablaster. And next to it, we have the Hypernova. So, again, very different building levels, very different people, but here's the key here. These are all basically what I would classify as super heavy vehicles. Their entire purpose is to be a breaker of the enemy via their sheer weight of shot and armor, basically. Once you can afford a million materials, you want to pull out one of these things and steamroll anything that the enemy has that is not able to counter it. That is their purpose. So, with that being said, I wanted to take a look at a super heavy from Borderwise, a super heavy from me, and a super heavy from the fan favorite designer, The Jewel, and see how they go about their business. Hopefully, we can learn a little bit about each of their design decisions and figure out how to improve our own super heavy machines for the future. First up then, we should look at the noob creation by me several years back, the RGH5 Ballistablaster. It has a material cost of 937,703 materials, a volume of 25,097, which I believe is not even a third of Gary, because it is very compact, and a armor cost of 21.2%, relatively glassy. It has a total firepower of 486.75, concentrated entirely in 2 massive railguns. It has a top speed out of battle of 56 meters per second, which is actually relatively slow for a thruster craft. Without further ado then, let's take a look at this Noob Trapped's internal systems. I'm sure anybody who has played a modern amount of From the Depths will see this ring relatively familiar. First up, right in front of all the armor, we have some turn jets. These produce a thrust of 36,000, which, let's see, that is the thrust of 2 jet engine flushes. And it is, interesting enough, just over the cost of 2 of them. So we might not be getting our money's worth entirely, but we do avoid the necessity of paying for the engines that these would actually require. So there's that. These are just placed, again, directly in front of all of the armor, which means that theoretically, any piercing shots are going to destroy these first, which is definitely not ideal. Right next to it, though, we have some LAMS nodes. We have a 8,000 power LAMS on each side for a total of 16,000 engine power dedicated to the anti-munition system, but it is very much not EMP shielded, which means it's going to get zapped the moment that anything comes its way. Yep, there goes that, there goes that. Everything's getting zapped. It's not a fun time to be a Ballistablaster. Right behind that, then, we have a whole array of lifting jet engines. Actually, let me undock this briefly to see if we even need that many jet engines. Generally, I like to go for a rule of thumb of the engines operating at half thrust when you are idling, so that you can lose a few and still be flying. I think it matters less when they're clustered together like this, because at this point you're probably going to either have all your jets or none of your jets, but still, a rule of thumb nonetheless. Yeah, it seems like we have just about enough thrust that we can operate mostly at a third power or half power. So, good. Redundancy. I guess one non-redundancy, though, is that if a piercing shot goes through the center of this, we may lose all propulsion and we will die. You're going to have to trust me on this, though. The old Hypernova operated like this exactly, if I recall. A lot of the old thruster craft back in the day did not have redundancy, and they did not have breadboard thrust vectoring algorithms to confuddle the enemy with. That's what I was basing this thing off of. It was the Hypernova at home. Speaking of Hypernova at home, we have a set of hybrid railguns. For some reason, these fire 7,200mm long shells instead of 8-meter. You could, again, just add a couple of extra modules, maybe tone the gauge down a bit, and fire larger shells. These are APHE, dealing 9,000 damage, which is almost enough to rationalize actually having HE warheads on here. They do, however, also have all of the railgun draw, which I'm still a fan of to this day, because it gives us a cool 2 million KDAP. That is enough to go through Gary, that is enough to go through the tier, probably not enough to go through any front-siders, because as a result of trigonometry, heavy armor wedges, just a little, I guess, a diversion here. Heavy armor wedges both benefit from a 20% increase in armor class from the shell impacting at an angle, as well as the massive increase in effective thickness via the fact that the shell is, again, also impacting at an angle. The cosine thing that we mentioned earlier. This means that, at least based on my calculations, the heavy armor beam has a anti-shell HPAC of 360,000. A heavy armor wedge 4-meter has a HPAC of 180,000, which is half that of a standard heavy armor beam block, but it has an anti-shell HPAC of 1.741 million, which is 5 heavy armor beam blocks. I don't know how much this works in practice, because I've got to actually shoot some shells at some heavy armor wedges to verify the calculations. But that's probably why a lot of people spam wedges. Speaking of which, did this guy spam wedges here? Did old me know about the wedge spam? We got one wedge over here. How much frontal armor does the Ballistablaster have, though? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 heavy armor blocks, 1 wedge, and then another 7 metal beams here. For a total of... Let's see. The Ballistablaster has 7 heavy armor beams, 1 wedge, and 7 metal beams. That is a HPAC of 3.29 million, which is 3 times that of the tier, and the frontal armor of the, Gary, the Bearclaw over here. So, that's quite a lot to get through. This shell is not getting through it. You probably at this point need particle cannons or a very powerful pierce laser. Or you could of course chunk it all away with plasma. That is a favorite as well, thanks to the new updates since this craft was made. Right behind that, you have the turbines necessary to fuel the massive railguns, and some forward engines. Honestly, considering the sheer size of the Ballistablaster, I would have expected that we'd be able to go faster. But another new mistake here, we don't actually have intake clearance here. These intakes are choking. They're not breathing air. This means that we lose almost half of our thrust immediately. Not nice at all. Back here then, we just have some haphazardly arranged material storage, fuel tanks, and the AI, which is quote-unquote heavily EMP surge protected by these random surge protectors that are just kind of slapped on top of it. There's heavy armor here, no rubber, no insulation, because I did not know what I was doing. We also have the radar target simulators with 11,000 signal strength, which let's see, is that actually enough to distract radar-guided missiles? No, because we have a stronger signature on pretty much every single side than the decoys. So, by my estimate, these decoys are going to do nothing. The interceptors are going to do something, though. If I recall, they did come in handy a little bit before. And then, oh yeah, we weren't fast enough, so I duct taped some extra jet engines right onto the back. Really interesting design choices past me. Time to blow up the ammo storage, too. Oh, we got some voids here. 1 detonation. Sets off the adjoining compartment immediately. Oh, it didn't. That's a lot of storage, though. Surprisingly enough, no chain reaction. So, I guess the ammo storage did its job. Nonetheless, I would consider the Ballistablaster to be very confusing, but its guns are still not to be trifled with, as despite the optimization errors on the guns, they still have a cool 913 material per firepower. They can go through a ton of armor, and they have decent stats, all things considered, especially since I would consider them very noob guns. They're even 2-clip, but again, they do have ejectors, which means they will not destroy themselves upon being hit. I think the biggest areas of improvement for a design like this is probably the mobility, then the redundancy, and the armor protection. Because all things considered, the Ballistablaster does not have very much of any of those things. It is vulnerable to EMP, it does not move very fast, and from the sides, I believe it is easily defeated, but let's take a look. Yeah, 2 layers of metal. Even a fighter jet throwing heat rounds is going to go straight through the cannons. There's no heat protection here. Make sure to add heat protection, folks. Just add a heavy armor beam slope on your super heavy units. And honestly, you should probably back the beam slope with heavy armor as well. Because you do not want to be hit from the sides. And with something that big, if there's multiple enemies in a battle, you can most definitely be hit from the sides. Don't do this, everyone. Make sure to add heat protection. Well, that is I guess, an alternative way to spend your money instead of buying a Gary, but, you know, by my view, this thing is far more fragile, if arguably a lot more offensively potent than Gary. So, your choice probably comes down to whether or not you want railguns. But unless you want railguns, I think Gary is the better choice here. Moving on then, it is time to discuss the Hypernova. everybody's favorite. I believe Martin Cito Pants was only able to beat one because he had something like a 3-to-1 material advantage. Because look at this thing. It looks menacing, and it is menacing. Jewel did a very good job doing the decoration of this thing. You almost forget that it's made out of square blocks. Without further ado, though, we should probably get to the stats. The Hypernova, made by the Jewel, is 1.35 million materials. It is cool 30% more expensive than Gary or the Ballistablaster. But it does have nearly twice the firepower of either of those. It also has 43,000 volume, which is, I believe, just under twice the Ballistablaster and just under half of Gary. That's actually kind of very funny to me. It has the exact same amount of armor as Gary, but it also has 700 firepower in the form of 666.34 APS firepower and 20.74 laser firepower. Okay, so the laser is very tiny, but I guess it is mostly only for anti-aircraft and nuke defense anyways, so it doesn't seem to be very strong at all. Let's take a look at what it's packing. Oh, first of all, though, yeah, 103 meters per second. It is very fast. Let's see what it's packing. Right behind so many meters of heavy armor, the main guns. It's packing a pair of, I believe these are 500mm cannons with a 100,000 rail draw, firing 3 different flavors of destroy you from the inside and destroy your soul while it's at it. You have APHE with 2.3 million KDAP, just like my shells, but it has 3 times the explosive damage of my shells from the Ballistablaster. It also has 1 solid forehead body and a base bleeder, I guess, for some reason. It makes it a bit inaccurate, but I guess whatever it's shooting at is probably so large it doesn't really matter. Next we got Sabo Frag. You're not supposed to use Sabo Frag? Well, nobody told the Hypernova. This thing has 3 million KDAP, and it reduces the effective impact angle to only 75% to get through the wedge spam. Next up, Sabo. Regular old Sabo, just sling through absolutely everything, 4.375 million KDAP. That is enough to go through every single vehicle we've gone through on this list, including the Ballistablaster with its pitiful 3.29 million HPAC. So yeah, if you want to protect yourself against the shells from the Hypernova, you will want a LAMS and you will want a ton of armor. If you want to protect yourself with 4 million from a 4 million HP KDAP, if you want to protect yourself from a 4 million KDAP shell, you're going to need 4 million HPAC, which is over 10 meters of heavy armor. Of course, putting some wedges in there is probably going to put that in your favor, but I wouldn't trust the raw HPAC of wedges, even given the trigonometry. I would play it safe. And you can, admittedly, with wedges. Although, keep in mind that they are half as dense as heavy armor beams. And do they even benefit from stacking? Yeah, they do benefit from stacking. But again, they are half as dense. And, in addition, by the way, a shell will go through 1 heavy armor wedge, but it has to go through 4 heavy armor beams. So keep that in mind. A shell will likely encounter fewer heavy armor wedges compared to a similar amount of heavy armor beams. That's why craft usually have a balance. Speaking of balance, what's keeping this thing balanced? Oh, just a whole bunch of custom jet engines. This is just one giant custom jet engine that slings all along the entire length of the vehicle. That's a lot of thrust. Is it efficient? Very. 17,000 thrust per material. I guess we do have a lot of volume to play with, and you can just put on a whole bunch of extra compressors. Because, if you have a lot of volume, then compressors will be less expensive, and they will add efficiency to your jet engine. Right, next to that, then, we have some extra processing power for a whole slew of sonar buoys. This thing is designed to really hate submarines, I guess. Right behind that, then, we should see the laser battery. A very small one, very modest, 5,000 engine power draw, Just probably, again, supposed to zap little tiny stuff for point defense. Probably wired to the SMNK point defense grid. Another famous builder in the film desk community. We then got some injector bricks. Classic. These have 324.9 power per material and 129 power per volume. That's better than the ones on the Gary. Now, how is that? Are these the ones... I'm curious. Are these... No, these are different as well from the Power Brick 1280 over here. There's so many ways to make injector bricks, and I don't know what's better. This is... Actually, no. The Power Brick 1280 is very bad, though. Do not use the Power Brick 1280. It has just under half the power per... just over half the power per volume of this thing right here. So, if you want injector bricks, get it from the Hypernova, I guess. Moving on, we have... Are these turbines? Yeah, I guess for the railguns. I don't know why they're set up like this. They are networked to a steam pipe system with valves that are currently open. I honestly would have expected them to be closed for being out of combat, but they're not. They're just set to be at minimum power. Maybe turbines have more leniency with regards to that than other steam engines, because if I recall, it's not normally a good idea for steam engines to be set running at full power all the time. Besides that, though, we do have... Oh, these AI components are EMP insulated. Very nice. Although, they're not... I mean, this is touching heavy armor, which is touching this jet engine, which is touching rubber, which is touching the AI. Partial insulation confuses me. I would think that the EMP would be able to just go through here. But... I'm not seeing any EMP damage dealt. If we notch it up a little bit. Okay, we see some damage. But... some stuff exploding. Okay, the rangefinders are exploding. I guess their Hypernova is not EMP proof. It decided to dedicate its resources to doing other things, I guess. But, nonetheless, what just explode on the inside? You're not one-shotting against AI with EMP, regardless. So, probably best not to try that. We also have a bunch of other jets over here. These, I believe, are the rear jets to point us backwards. No, these are forward jets. They are pointed directly into the exhaust. But it doesn't seem like they're blocked, so... Oh, wait a second. I think I know why. I think this jet exhaust is on a spin block. Very nice. I didn't think of that. Lots of jet engines in general here. We have 5 spin blocks and a bunch of turrets. I presume the turrets over here are for the lasers. Yep, they are. The spin blocks are for the various jets, which I believe are controlled by a breadboard. Then we have one more turret here called Large Missile Detector. I don't know what that's for. Curious. But we have the AI here, we have the Joule AI here, and I believe the SMNK AI here. Indeed, the SMNK AI cannot take over control in the event the Joule AI goes down, but it does handle the targeting. Okay, let's take a look at the breadboard then. Oh, look at that, it's even commented. Gotta love it. It takes in a C propulsion drive, roll inputs, strafe inputs, and then it shoves them through some kind of mathematical algorithm. It seems like it's running 2 equations here at once and outputting 2 of them at the same time. Over to here. Interesting. So I guess this controls a spin block angle. This controls... Yeah, this controls both the spin block angle and, after running through this little algorithm, the propulsion vectors. I am unfortunately not too familiar with how to use trigonometry to modulate specifically this type of spin block thrust vectoring, but it does seem like a very nice option in order to modulate the direction of your thrust. Because if we, for example, undock the Hypernova, those jets immediately swing down, and left, and right. This removes the need to have a bunch of jet engines pointed in various directions, because the Hypernova's jets will just vector themselves to whatever direction that's necessary. Although I think this is like just a little bit cheaty. The jet's basically here. It's a 3x3 extending out by over here. So if you have enough room for a 5x5 turret to rotate in, then you can have one of these. The Hypernova's jets, which in my opinion is like a little bit cheaty, but I'm going to fault them for it because it's very impressive. They can probably strafe left and right by thrusting directly into the railguns. But hey, it's on spin blocks. You can do that with spin blocks. Nothing stopping you from doing that with spin blocks, apart from the fact that you need a university degree in aerospace engineering in order to figure out how to program something like this. Haha, funny joke. Alright, well that was that. We have jets, we have turbines, we have railgun components. Jewel also did a very good job neatly decorating the various detection components. Nothing here looked out of place at all, and we have a cool 50 detection processing power. I presume the rest is for the sonar buoys that it's spitting out. And, cherry on top, some missile interceptors to deal with enemy missiles. Why does it have smalls instead of mediums? I think smalls have better bang for the buck. I don't like to use them because they're laggy, though. Oh, and just because, why not? We have some micro-missile banks over here. Just some mini incendiary missiles to do something. Probably mostly to fight small craft, although I couldn't tell you because there's no turning thruster here. Judging by the fact that there's a regulator, I mean, I guess it does need a regulator because these are small missiles and they will self-destruct after 10 seconds, 20 seconds with a regulator now. But still, very interesting little tiny feature I didn't know that the Hypernova had. Then a Heartstone, because you need a Heartstone to stay alive on the Hypernova. Okay, this thing is a lot, but we're not even done yet, because we need to take a look at its armor. Let's cut it in half first. How much armor do we have? Is this metal or is this heavy armor? This is alloy. Interesting. We have alloy and then a bunch of voids. A bunch of spaces. I mean, spaced armor is very effective. If you don't want to spend money on armor, then just use air. Classic move. Then we have some heavy armor beams and 2-meter wedges. This makes me also question the actual validity of my trig calculations on the effectiveness of heavy armor wedges. Because if a 4-meter wedge is indeed 4 times as effective as a 2-meter wedge, then you wouldn't expect this number. Yeah, you would not expect such a reduction. I mean, the heavy armor wedge is half the angle of this 2-meter wedge. But given the fact that a lot of new builds seem to use 2-meter wedges, not 4-meter wedges, it seems like the 2-meter wedge is just generally more compact. It allows, I'd say it allows for more room for heavy armor blocks, but we're using air here. So, I mean, it seems like you could use 4-meter wedges if you wanted. Looks like the existence of an air block was deemed more valuable than the existence of a 4-meter wedge. Interesting. How much HPAC do we have here, though? Okay, I did the math. Of course, it varies based on the actual location that you're measuring from, because the Hypernova is not symmetrical forward in this direction. But if we take the rough number of 11 heavy armor beams, 10 alloy beams, and effectively two heavy armor wedges, if you count 4-meter in terms of HPAC, because these have half the HPAC of a 4-meter wedge. then just based on raw health points and armor class, you have an HPAC of 5.28 million, which is theoretically enough to withstand its own sabot shells. That's very scary. I don't believe the top is slightly less scary. You just have some... You still have two wedge... what is this? You have two 4-meter slopes and a metal beam. And the sides... You have, let's see, that's 2 beams, 2 metal, and then that's it. Does this vary along the cross-section again? Like, let's take one over here. Nope, that's just metal. Maybe more towards the back. Like around the AI compartment and the jets. Okay, so sometimes you have 2 meters of heavy armor beams to go through. Sometimes over here you have, oh look at that, poles. Border-wise has been vindicated. Sometimes around the jets you have another heavy armor beam to go through. Actually, is that... So sometimes there's 2. In this case you have 2 to go through to jets. Then another 2 to go through until you actually reach the AI compartments. Again, 4 heavy armor blocks is nothing to sneeze at, but compared to the monstrosity that you face when you're in front of this thing, it's practically a cakewalk. So, if you want to attack the Hypernova, attack it from the top or the bottom, then maybe the sides, and hopefully not the front unless you have a battering ram of a particle cannon. Overall, though, the Hypernova is an incredibly impressive design that I would not want to be on the receiving end of any day, regardless of what craft I have. And it has certainly earned its place as one of the most threatening craft on Neater. I guess, what did we learn today? Hopefully we have some kind of takeaway from this after all the stuff we just talked about. Make sure to adequately protect your craft from all angles, even if it is a front-sider. Agility is important. Even a super heavy machine can have significant maneuverability, provided you have enough custom jets for it. Guess railguns are very important, but CRAM cannons are also CRAM cannons, and you might want to just go for those to destroy stuff the old-fashioned way. And make sure to armor the specific components that you expect to take hits from, and possibly siphon away any extra protection from internal voids that won't actually matter if they get hit. So again, I think the Gary could probably have some armor reduced from the sides over here, and the bottom areas over here. Heck, maybe you could use the extra material and make a Super Gary with railguns and plasma cannons to destroy the Scarlet Dawn. That's just a hypothetical, though. I hope everybody enjoyed this little craft review of Gary the Bearclaw, and the subsequent reviews of the Ballistablaster and Hypernova, and I hope you learned something today. If you did, why not leave a like and a subscribe? I think it's the first time I suggested people do that, actually. Besides that, then, I will see you all next time for another From the Depths craft review.